My name is Joseph Manzoli. I'm the president of Colourfast Custom Coatings. I started the company in February of 1992, so we're just over 33 years old. I came from a family of metal finishers. My dad was in the electroplating business. He started his own company. He worked for someone and then he started his own company back in the 60s in Toronto. So I learned the ins and outs of the process and manufacturing and all that type. His focus was on furniture. Coincidentally, that's one of our biggest markets at Colourfast as well. It wasn't in this facility. It was a much smaller location that I started in. Also in Concord, Ontario. The majority of my business was focused on contract furniture, and that slowly evolved. And my mentor has always told me, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. When I started, it was in the middle of a deep recession in Canada. So there wasn't a lot of business out there to begin with. But as time moved forward, I started to spread my wings. I did all the sales for the company. When I first started, I was a painter. I was the hooker on the line. I was the QC, accounts receivable and payable. I did everything for the company. So I had very humble beginnings. And then, slowly as time progressed, after the first 6 months, I started getting into the store fixturing industry, spreading my wings a little bit. And that turned into also contract furniture, but institutional seating for airport seating, for example, hospital seating, all of that type of thing, as opposed to just an office chair. That evolved into architectural lighting, started getting into electrical transformer housings, a little bit of automotive. So it covered a lot of the various different markets, outdoor patio furniture, outdoor railings and fences. It was all over the place. And then, as time moved on, I kind of picked and chose what direction I wanted the company to follow. It was from day one, it was always about quality as opposed to quantity. And in big part because I was forced to. My first facility, I think the line speed at max was 3.5 feet a minute. So in technical terms, compared to what we're doing today, is a third or a quarter of the speed of what we would be doing here. So I couldn't compete with a lot of the bigger guys. So I was forced to, focus all of my attention on surrounding myself with customers who weren't really big necessarily in volume, but also had a focus on quality.
What made Steelhead the right ERP choice for Colourfast?
We approached Steelhead because the system that we had, although great from the time that we started up until we started working from Steelhead, became antiquated. There were a couple of issues. So from a technical standpoint of view, we were working off of live servers. We had a server, a main server in our room, and a lot of the software it was access-based software, and a lot of the new servers were not compatible. So it was a compatibility issue between the hardware and the software. So whenever we had to, by the tail end of our cycle with that custom software, whenever we had to replace an existing workstation, for example, it became problematic because one change in the hardware would shut the whole system down. So we were having glitches. Yeah, it was a compatibility issue. So the transition to Steelhead was a lot easier than a lot of the other off-the-shelf software ERP systems that were available to us. We realized when we started the search for a replacement that unless we went fully customized again, we wouldn't be able to retrieve or have at our fingertips the information that we were able to get from the custom software. Steelhead has evolved to a point where it's in some areas, in most areas, at least as good as what we had. In some areas, much better than what we had. So it's like having custom software at this point compared to where we were 6 or 7 years ago. What's really critical is to be able to get the information that Steelhead allows us to achieve. And there's nothing else on the marketplace right now, in my opinion, that I've seen anyways, that unless it's custom, that compares to Steelhead. So Steelhead will automatically generate a report that says these are the sectors where you did the most work for last month. These are your top 15 customers for last month. So that resonates with me because it gives me an indication as to where the markets are going and how we're doing and who's moving, who's not, more importantly, who's not moving. So when I see a customer who's traditionally top 5 all of a sudden is down to 12 or 13, it raises a flag for me, and I'll sit down during our management review. I'm still engaged with the management review meetings that are held monthly, and we'll review things like that. So what's happening with customer ABC? They're typically, oh no, they had a shutdown or they lost a contract, and what does that mean to us? Do we have to replace that, or where do we go from here? So it's more strategizing, analyzing, deep analysis and strategizing, but it's more of a high level conversation that I'm having with the team at this point.
My name is Manzoli. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Colourfast Corp. We're a family-owned business. We've been in business for almost 35 years. We pride ourselves on our quality, our lead times, and our customer service. So we're able to handle many different types of jobs. Like, what I mean by that is different sectors. We're very adaptable and flexible. We work with the customer, and we're able to kind of handle anything that's thrown at us. So I would like to think that our adaptability is one of our most distinctive features. We do sometimes 20, 25 color changes in a day. And we have, I think we're up to like 700 different colors in stock as of the end of our last fiscal year. Yeah, so we can basically handle anything. Once we decided that a new ERP system was the next move for us, I did some research. I really did most of the legwork myself. Researched online, found a few companies that I approached. Steelhead was one of them, and ultimately that's who we ended up going with. So I think we started talking in 2022, and then we deployed in March of 2023, right at the end of March, yeah.
With the adoption of Steelhead, you've had a first-hand view of its growth. From your perspective, what does this look like?
Oh yeah, I mean it's exploded with growth over the past 2 years. The team, number one, has grown exponentially, and the software itself has also grown with it. And the amount of features that have been updated in the ERP software has just been great. It's fantastic. So. Yeah, the growth in Steelhead's been amazing, and I'm happy to see that it's chugging along. So my use of Steelhead is mainly my day-to-day stuff is mainly quoting, and that's the majority of my time is focused on quoting and reporting. Those are the two areas that I oversee. I also, in terms of a broader perspective, I was the one who set up the system, the software for our specific use. So I handle a lot of the, when there are updates or new features to use, I'm the one who goes in there and sorts through it and figures out how we could best apply it here at Colourfast.
How was quoting done prior to Steelhead?
Yeah, so we're probably a little bit different from a lot of the other Steelhead customers where we had a pre-existing software, ERP in place, and then we just sort of replaced it, whereas I'm assuming most of the other Steelhead customers didn't have any ERP system at all, and we're just kind of using like a pen and paper or spreadsheets, Excel, that type of thing. Our quoting hasn't changed much in terms of how we actually do it, in terms of like, formulas being used and whatnot. The software has changed, which has allowed me to, so when we used to quote in the old system, administratively, it would just be, entering a part number and putting a price to it. With Steelhead, I'm able to enter a part number, assign it to a specific process, upload diagrams, pictures of the parts. If there's any special requirements such as masking requirements or special hanging requirements or A surfaces versus B surfaces, all those instructions, all that kind of stuff I can actually put right into the part number profile in Steelhead so that, you know, directly from the quote they can flip it into an order, and then my operators on the shop floor can actually see all the special instructions, the hanging instructions and the masking instructions and whatnot. So it kind of streamlines communication instead of where our old system we actually had a different database for quoting than for production. So Steelhead is all one database, and it streamlines it so that there's fewer miscommunications from one database to the next. It's just all one. Like I said, it's streamlined and it's very easy to use.
How has Steelhead improved the flow of quotes through the production floor? What inefficiencies has it eliminated?
Double entries for sure, because they were separate databases. We weren't able to flip a quote into an order. And when we had tried doing that, we had tried setting up macros and stuff to handle that, you know, in terms of the actual coding itself in the software. Theoretically, we could do it, but it was just in action, it wasn't working the way we wanted it to. Now with Steelhead, because everything is so streamlined, it's at the point now where our operations guys are able to reference quote numbers quite easily, whereas in our old system they weren't. Our customers with the new customer portal are able to go in and see all their quotes or you know, sales orders and invoices, all that stuff. So everybody's able to see it and reference these numbers so that when they do send us purchase orders, you know, the quote reference is on there. They sometimes even physically attach the PDF to their email where they're sending us the purchase order, and it just sort of keeps everything streamlined so that we know, okay, this is this quote, and we can just flip it into an order and all the instructions are on there and there's no miscommunications.
Do you feel you're more efficient today than you were before? Why or why not?
Absolutely, it saves time. Yeah, the double entry is a big one, because I have seen occasions here where my guys have, like, I've spent all kinds of time entering a quote, and then the customer doesn't reference it, and my guys have to go in and enter it a second time. They're entering a purchase order a second time, and it's a lot of wasted time. And that's basically what we used to do with our old software all the time. So yeah, it's a huge time saver, and because you know, it's coming right from quoting, it's coming right from the top of the process. So if there's any special, like I said, any special instructions or whatever, it's coming directly from the quote. It's coming directly from the top. I'm even structurally, I'm at the top of the company. So if there's any issues, they know to come right to me, and it just keeps it all streamlined.
How much has Steelhead improved operational efficiency?
That's a great question in terms of specifics. I would say just a stab in the dark, at least we're running, you know, 30% more efficiently based on timing saved from everything running through Steelhead.
Has the throughput of parts improved since adopting Steelhead?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of aspects to that. I think the fact that we are able to see everything in real time, plan effectively and more efficiently, it definitely helps with the execution of you know, our process. So having the more efficient processes both in the software, or sorry, I should say having the more efficient process with the software directly translates to the process on the floor as well. The more efficient software makes us able to plan and execute more efficiently.
You found the Steelhead reports and insights valuable?
Yeah, there's there's been some reports on there that really, like, I looked at them at first and I said, that's interesting, because I never thought to track something like that. You know, the inventory on hand was a big one, just because it's something we focused on in our most recent fiscal year, tracking our inventory value as a whole, and just seeing that you could do that in Steelhead natively was amazing. Another one that was super interesting, quote, win ratios. You know, it is something we considered in the past, but having a report, you know, natively in Steelhead to see, you know, what percentage of quotes you're winning and losing is amazing. You know who to spend time on when you're quoting, and who you can sort of, you know, not spend that much time on. You know, customer churn rates and retention, all fascinating reports that we never would have thought to, you know, get custom done, are natively built into Steelhead. And then, you know, when it comes to the dashboard for the reports, you can pin whichever reports you find to be, you know, the most important. You can create custom charts and graphs and all kinds of different stuff and have it all in one place on one page. Just a quick glance, you know where you're at for your sales for the day, for the month, which process is doing how much. Everything's all in one place at a glance, and it's just that is one of my favorite parts of Steelhead, is the reporting and the dashboards for the reporting.
Has Colourfast become more profitable since partnering with Steelhead?
Yes, you could say that. I don't know if I would attribute that to Steelhead, but it's certainly a part of it, right? Again, it all comes down to the amount of data you have, which allows you to make business decisions moving forward, along with the improvements in efficiency, time saved on administration. Again, it just allows you to focus your efforts more on more important things like looking at data and seeing where we're making money, where we're losing money, and focusing more on those things and going after more of those things. So yes, you know, it allows you, the amount of data you get in the native reports in Steelhead is definitely going to help you focus more on profitable accounts. That's one of the things because I used to work with Mark Madigan on reporting, and that was one of the things I told him all the time. You guys got to work on your reporting, and yeah, you guys came up with this native insights, and it's been amazing. I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to be so good, and it's just exceeded all my expectations.
How have workboards helped streamline operations?
The workboards are a huge improvement from our old system, our old software. The workboards give visibility to everybody. So everybody on the shop floor is able to look at the workboards and know what is coming in, what has been received, and what is being processed at which stage at any time of the day. And you know, our old software was very modular. So our old software would use an Excel spreadsheet to import data from the database and put it onto a spreadsheet in a list, right? And then we would manipulate it, and that would be our schedule. And you know, if things had to change on the fly, it wasn't easy to do it. And then because you're doing manual manipulation of the spreadsheet, there's higher chances of errors being made, cells being deleted by accident, you know, wrong colors being input by accident, if they're copying and pasting cells and whatnot. So with Steelhead, the workboard is the replacement for what our spreadsheet was. And if there's any changes being made, it's in real time. Our guys get updates right away. be it priority sequence, be it changes in color, be it changes in quantities, everything is in real time. And you know, I can't emphasize how important it is to have real-time data in this industry. With this industry, everything's happening so quickly. Customers always want their stuff yesterday. So when things are being, when changes are being made on the fly, it needs to be in real time. And Steelhead has been a huge proponent of that for sure.
How do work order labels help operators with their workflow?
Yeah, so labels are a fantastic tool because it's a sort of like in-your-face notification, so to speak, for the operators to visibly see as they're processing work orders. I'll give you examples. We use it for rush orders. We'll put a rush label on it. Or if there's an order that requires special masking, we'll put a masking required label or special packaging. And it just, because you can make it any color you want, it's great. It just pops right out while they're looking at the workboard and physically moving parts on the workboards. They can see that there's labels attached to them, and it just flags it. It allows them to know, okay, hey, I need to do something special with this order.
What are the benefits of having real-time data?
There's several benefits. Number one, with the scheduling module and the way it works in Steelhead, you have an actual calendar view. If you set it up properly with, treatment times and estimated times and all that stuff, which, I know we're getting into the weeds now, but if you set it up all properly, you can see visually, you can see on a calendar when orders are going to be ready based on those estimations. So when a customer calls and is asking, when is my order going to be ready, you can visibly look at a calendar and say, it's going to be ready tomorrow at 3 p.m. based on this schedule. Additionally, with the new customer portal, customers are actually able to just log in and take a look and see what the status is on their order. It reduces the amount of calls that we get, the amount of emails that we get, frees up a lot more time for us to focus on the internal processing and operation of the company itself. So it's a huge benefit for sure, time saver.
Were there any concerns about giving customers access to the portal to live track their parts?
No. I guess just because of how we set it up in the portal, because you can, sort of give customers permissions on what they can see and what they can't see. So, as long as you set it up properly and you're, you set up the permissions properly, it's fine. I haven't had any issues with that at all.
What value does scheduling in Steelhead provide?
With the new scheduling module, like I said, there's a calendar view. You set up the treatment times and all that stuff. You can have estimations on when parts are going to be ready. Scheduling is extremely important. Referencing my past statement about timing being everything here. Things move very, very quickly, and we need to know where we're at, when the stuff is going to be ready. Stuff changes on the fly all the time, and we need to make sure that we're staying on top of it.
What are the benefits of Steelhead's chat feature?
So if there is an issue with a work order, like let's say there's a quantity discrepancy, or we didn't receive a specific part, we couldn't find it in the plant, whatever it is, if there's something missing, something wrong, we use the chat function, and because we're able to link work orders in the chat, it's super easy. We just link the work order, say there's missing parts here, at whoever needs to be added, and they are able to look into it with the customer. The chat function is great too. Just in keeping with the whole real-time data and the speed of the industry, the chat is real time. So when something happens, you get a notification right away. somebody can look into it and resolve the issue like immediately.
What are the benefits of using inventory in Steelhead?
Yeah, the inventory is fantastic for a few reasons. So if we want to compare it to my old software, we only tracked our powder inventory in our old software. Now with Steelhead, because we're able to create separate inventories for each, like inventory type, so to speak, we're able to track our powder, we're able to track our packaging supplies, our masking supplies, even all the way down to spray gun components. We keep an inventory of that. The more data you have, the better. You're not scrambling when a gun breaks down and you need a specific part. We know that we have it in stock. We could just grab it from our inventory and replace it. And then the second part of the inventory that's really beneficial is it ties in with the insights. So we can see what our inventory on hand was over time. We can see when there's spikes and falls, and again, the more data you have, the better you can run your company. So it's a great tool to use for sure. It ties in with your profit and loss. So that, let's say your purchases were high one month, but your inventory also grew. The raise in inventory value offsets the over budget purchases. As long as you can, turn that into sales, that you'll eventually make it back. And either way, it comes, it affects the bottom line when you're doing your year-end reporting and your inventory grew. It's an asset. So it's very valuable to track your inventory over time. Absolutely.
What's your approach to depleting inventory on the production floor?
We originally tried depleting to work orders, and I know it's great for granularity on, profit margins per work order. Because we're running a conveyor line system and not individual booths with individual racking and whatnot, we're sort of it's a conveyor line that needs to keep moving. We don't have time to stop and record a powder depletion for every single work order that comes through. Because we're high volume, what we do is we record powder depletions at the end of a run. So let's say we're running a satin black, we're running it for 3 hours. There's 15 different work orders on that run. We just deplete it to the station as opposed to each individual work order. And then we've tied in a custom report that allows us to pull our powder consumption costs for the day, for whatever date range we want to put in there. And it basically does a bulk calculation of how much powder was depleted versus how many sales were attributed to that specific powder for that time period. And it gives us our powder consumption costs. But again, due to the high volume nature of our specific company, we're more worried about tracking trends and colors and as a whole rather than individual work orders. Steelhead does give you that flexibility where you can do whatever you want. You can track each individual order if you want to, or you can track, bulk runs of colors. You can do, the flexibility is there, so you can do whichever you prefer. So we run on a sales per hour, sales per day model. So we know that in order for us to make X profit margin, we need to sell this amount of dollars per day. And then based on that, we've used those calculations to determine how much we need to sell per hour. And then we get one step more granular by determining line speed and how many pieces can fit on one load bar at a time. And based on that, we know what the cost should be in order for us to achieve our sales per hour and sales per day goals. Again, based on our specific model, this might not apply to other companies in the industry, but the way we do it is we know that our powder consumption cost needs to be X amount. And if it's higher or lower, then we know if they're is profit or loss based on that specific cost. It's a percentage of our sales.
How was maintenance tracked before using Steelhead, and how is it managed today?
So maintenance, how we used to track it was sort of through spreadsheets and Word documents, manually tracking it by hand, and then scanning and uploading reports to our database. We're ISO certified, so we need to make sure that we're maintaining the equipment as per our ISO certifications, and it's very important for us to have documentation on that. So the great thing with Steelhead is all that documentation and procedure is in one place. Whereas for our old system, we had different documents, different spreadsheets, and sometimes it was difficult to find what needs to go where. Everything's all in one place in Steelhead. You can put your equipment in the system as well as a piece of equipment that needs to be maintained, and then you can set up recurring plans so that if you need to do something daily or weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever it is, you set it up in Steelhead, and then it notifies you when it's time to complete the maintenance event, which is also great because we would get guys saying, I forgot to do this weekend, right? With Steelhead, it notifies you and says, okay, this needs to be done. These are the steps. And then you just fill it out, what was done, yes, no, whatever the specifics of it are, you can set it up to whatever you need. The customization is incredible. And just the fact that you can create recurring plans that notify you when they need to be completed is a huge asset to have, which we've just recently, like within this past week, we've now implemented it into Steelhead itself. So things like a daily pre-treatment calibration test, where you go in and you have to test the pH levels and the acid levels of your tanks. This is I think it's a relatively new feature in Steelhead, but we just set it up, like I'm not kidding you, like a few days ago. So it allows you to go in and record what the pH levels are, what the acid levels are. If they're within range, you can set ranges, and if it's not, it's like a pass-fail type thing. And then it resets every morning, so you have to go in every morning and record and test and record the test results, and it prompts you to do it. So yeah, that's one of those things that we just recently implemented, and I think it's fantastic to have it. It's another thing, just consolidating everything all into one place. It's fantastic to have, and then you can look at the dashboard and you can see a graph of what your pH levels and your acid levels were for each tank. Everything's all in one place. It's great.
Was maintenance difficult to set up?
It was a little bit tricky to get set up and start using. A little bit tricky. I mean, comparatively speaking, when you're set up, it's just so much easier. There's a big time saver element there. Like I said, because everything's consolidated into one spot, and once you've done the 10-minute training session, it's easy to use.
How would you describe the Steelhead user experience?
So with order entry, it can go a few ways. If you're flipping quotes into orders, it's super easy. It's literally a click of a button, and then you just confirm all the numbers and off you go. Manually entering orders is also relatively easy. I would say it only takes about a 5 to 10 minute training session to figure it all out, and then that's it. Moving parts, I mean, that's you get shown it once or twice and you know what to do. Mistakes happen every once in a while, but they're fixable. And when it comes to shipping, super easy to use, very intuitive. Everything's right there. It's been a very smooth deployment. When we first signed up and we deployed, we were fully deployed after the setup. We were fully deployed in a day. So other softwares might take weeks to get everything deployed fully, but we were operational within a day. Again, there were mistakes. Obviously, there's going to be a slight learning curve. Especially considering that we were used to an old system and now we're switching to a new system. So again, it might be a little bit different than Steelhead's other customers who didn't have any systems prior to Steelhead. So it's a little bit of a different type of learning curve for us. But again, it didn't take long for them to figure it out at all.
How have timesheets within Steelhead provided value?
Yeah, so we're using the time clock function for sure, which is another huge benefit, because we used to just do like a manual punch clock, and then we'd have to calculate everybody's hours and by hand, and the timesheets is a huge time saver for that. Just the ability to have our employees clock in and clock out, and it tracks the hours in Steelhead is a huge time saver.
What's your perspective on invoicing through Steelhead?
It's been rock solid. We've had no issues with it. It's super easy to just invoice through Steelhead, and then it gets pushed into QuickBooks. You don't have to worry about anything. Everything's all there. You can set up your invoices the way you want to. You can email them directly with one click. You can email several invoices all at once. Again, time savers, just little things here and there that just continuously add up to the overall time saved with Steelhead.
What are the benefits of integrating purchase orders and bills with your accounting software?
Yeah, so having purchase orders and bills integrated in Steelhead just streamlines communication between your accounting department and your purchasing department, right? So let's say you cut a PO to a vendor for 5 different powders, and you get multiple invoices for that one purchase order. It makes it easier for your accounting department to know what's already been billed and what hasn't been billed. If they're overbilling you, if they're billing you twice for something, they'll know right away, because with the bills function, you can receive a bill directly against that line of the purchase order. Whereas if you're using a separate accounting software, or you're not integrated with your accounting software, then your accounting department won't know if they've been double billed for something unless they do some manual investigation to it, right? So yeah, the bills function, huge. And yeah, purchase orders are relatively easy to use. Straightforward. I like that it pulls the inventory items information from the inventory, pricing, descriptions, all that stuff, and it makes it super easy to cut POs and send them to your vendors. You can email it directly in Steelhead, which is another great feature. Yeah, and it just streamlines everything.
What advantages come with using the Watchtower?
It gives you sort of an overview of the work that's in the plant, where it's at. You can set up filters so that you know how much work needs to be done still, or how much work needs to be shipped. It's great. It's just like a good overview of all the work you have in your facility.
What value does the shipping module provide?
Love the fact that you can get digital signatures. Everything is, all the packing slips are saved right in the system. With our old software, we had to print out packing slips, have the customer sign it, and then if we wanted to save them, we would have to scan them into the system and put them in a database just for packing slips, which took up all kinds of hard drive space. And it takes a lot of time to scan. We're running through hundreds of packing slips in a week. It was a big, having it right in the system is a huge time saver.
Is the rework function in Steelhead beneficial? If so, how?
Yes, very. It's beautiful. It's the best system. It's the best. Steelhead make the job much easier. I'm so happy with it. Everything, like when I say that, like everything lined out. Like there's a system after system. So like you can do no wrong. because if you do something wrong, everything jump out. So that's the good thing about it.
Has production become more efficient with Steelhead?
Well, as you can see, like there's no paper required. I will use my printer in like maybe what, 6 months. Compared before, I would go through like stack of every month. I use like a whole stack of paper to print schedule. But now everything is night and day. Like compared to what we had, like even though it's new to us, like every day goes by, we get more familiar with it. Like I would say like it's like 90% better to what we used to do, because this still let you do things in one shot. Like compared to what we used to do, we have to do this and do 1, 2, 3. We have to do 5 things to complete one. Everything is just like right there. By the touch of a button, everything been good, and like that's a good thing too. Like if there's an issue or anything, once we reach out, it's fixed right away.
If you could tell Steelhead management one thing, what would that be?
Keep up the good work.
Is order entry in Steelhead difficult to use?
It was initially, but once you get the hang of it, and with all the new updates that we have been receiving, it has gotten simpler now that it stores all the parts. If we're repeating parts, because we do repeat parts from certain clients, in that case, it'll just pop up, and all the data that we last processed it with, including the color and the price, it's stored in memory. So it makes it quite easy.
How would you describe your experience with shipping through Steelhead?
It's actually pretty straightforward for shipping, because the way I think the software has been designed, it's like it's easy for a layperson who's not technically very savvy could still operate this. So basically, when the parts are stationed here and under the ready to ship section, they just make arrangements with our drivers that this stuff is supposed to be shipped to this address. And because we have our customer pages set up with the address for shipping, it's the packing slip gets printed out with the address. So it makes it much easier to coordinate logistics.
How would you describe your experience with invoicing in Steelhead?
It's been pretty easy. Everything is here once it's shipped, so it makes it easier. Like I don't have to manually change a lot of stuff with invoicing, because the prices and the parts that I entered during order entry, it's the same format that comes up, and it has a function where the tax is also added to it automatically, so it pretty much generates a proper full invoice. So that's been good.
What benefits have you gained from Steelhead reporting?
So the reporting page has been really helpful with us just tracking where our progress has been throughout the day. So it's made it really easy to track if we're behind schedule or if we're actually ahead of schedule, how much sales we have generated at any given time when we just refresh the reporting page. So that's been really helpful. And we can visually see what our targets are, how much purchases we've been making, which clients do we get the most revenue from, and which has really made it really streamlined to keep track of a lot of things.
Has implementing Steelhead reduced the number of questions directed to management?
Yes, it has, because it's all set. If there are any changes, they are also easily communicated through the group chat we have here. This has also come in very handy for communication between operators for different sections. We send out all of the messages regarding production for here. If, for example, we're processing a certain group of parts for a company, and instead of 100, we were only shipped 99 parts out of those, or 95 parts, and we have parts that were short. Once they go through the packaging section, the operator here will tell us that, oh, we had 5 parts short. In that case, I will be sending emails to our clients letting them know that your shipments were short, or if they missed anything that were supposed to be sent to us.
How effective has Steelhead's quality management system been for your operations?
We haven't used that function of Steelhead quite often because when we do put stuff for quality on hold, they're usually processed again right away, especially if we're running the same color. So we will just put the part again on the conveyor line after we sand or process whatever needs to be done for the part to be repainted. So we don't have the quality hold for a long time. What we have been doing is we have been creating RMAs for parts that customers might send back to us. So it has also made it really simple to do all the documentation required to process those NCR or RMA parts that we get back for recoating.
Have Steelhead's native quality reports provided value to Colourfast?
So we do have a report called reject rate, where it calculates what percentage of reworks we had for that particular production day. So that's come in really handy to minimize those amounts. If it's under a certain percentage, that means we did fairly well. If it goes over the threshold, that means we need to take steps to mitigate that.
I'm Marino Manzoli. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Colourfast, and we are powered by Steelhead.